I stopped doing everything. 2 weeks later, my husband was begging me to help. I said no, and I felt calm. That's the part people don't expect. They think I was angry, or cruel, or planning some dramatic punishment. I wasn't. I felt strangely steady, like something inside me had finally clicked into place. Before you judge me, before you decide whose side you're on, let me talk to you for a minute. Not as a headline, not as a lesson, just as a woman telling you exactly how this unfolded, one quiet moment at a time. Because this didn't start with silence. It started with a sentence. You don't do anything all day. He said it casually, not in a fight, not even with anger, just stated it like a fact he'd been holding onto for a while. I remember where I was standing when he said it. The kitchen. Late afternoon. The light coming in at that slanted angle that makes dust visible in the air. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't defend myself. I didn't list everything I'd done since waking up. I just nodded. And that's the part that confused him the most. You see, when someone tells you that you contribute nothing, there's an expectation attached to it. They expect tears, or arguments, or explanations. They expect you to fight for your worth. I didn't. Instead, something quiet settled over me. Not numbness, not shock. More like clarity, slow, deliberate, undeniable. I remember thinking, okay, if that's what you see, then let's make sure you really see it. I didn't announce anything. I didn't warn him. I didn't turn it into a point to prove. I simply stopped. The cooking, the cleaning, the invisible errands, the remembering, the emotional cushioning that kept everything smooth without anyone noticing. I didn't slam doors or give speeches. I woke up each day, did exactly what was required of me, and nothing more. At first, nothing changed. And that almost made me laugh. Because when you've been quietly holding a life together, your absence doesn't register immediately. The house doesn't fall apart on day one. The routines still run on momentum. People assume things are just happening, but they aren't. They're being done. And when they stop being done, reality takes a while to catch up. Before I tell you how those 2 weeks unfolded, I need you to understand something about me. I wasn't looking for revenge. I wasn't trying to teach a lesson. I wasn't secretly keeping score. I was listening to how it felt to finally match my effort to the way it was valued. Listening to the quiet in my own head when I stopped managing someone else's comfort. Listening to the difference between being needed and being taken for granted. You might already be forming an opinion. That's okay. Most people do by now. But stay with me, because the begging didn't come the way you think it did. And my refusal wasn't cold the way it sounds. This story isn't about chores. It's about what happens when someone tells you, plainly, that your presence has no weight, and you decide to believe them. If you've ever been in a relationship where your effort was invisible, if you've ever been told, directly or indirectly, that what you do doesn't count, then I think you'll understand why I reacted the way I did. Let me take you back to before that sentence was spoken, before I stopped, before he realized what nothing actually looked like. Because once you see the whole picture, this won't feel like punishment. It will feel like the only honest response I had left. Before that sentence ever landed between us, my life felt settled. Not exciting in a movie way, not perfect, but solid, predictable in the way that lets you breathe without thinking about it. My husband and I had been married just under 4 years. We lived in a modest house, not big, not small, in a quiet neighborhood where nothing ever really happened. The kind of place where the loudest sound at night was a neighbor's garage door closing. We both worked, but my schedule was more flexible than his. That became the unspoken arrangement early on. He left for work around 7 every morning. I woke up with him, made coffee, packed his lunch without being asked. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. It felt like partnership, like care. When he walked out the door, I cleaned up breakfast, started a load of laundry, answered emails, paid bills, scheduled appointments. I worked part-time from home, enough to contribute financially, but not enough to compete with his paycheck. That difference mattered more to him than he ever admitted. By the time he came home, the house was calm. Dinner was ready or almost ready. Groceries were stocked. His favorite snacks magically reappeared when they ran out. I remembered birthdays, deadlines, family obligations. I reminded him to call his mother. I smoothed over awkward conversations with his friends. I was the buffer between chaos and comfort. And I was okay with that. I didn't feel small doing it. I felt useful, grounded, proud, even. I told myself this was what building a life looked like. Not glamorous, not loud, but intentional. Inside, I believed something very simple. We're a team. Different roles, same respect. Emotionally, I felt safe. He wasn't cruel. He wasn't volatile. He didn't yell. He just assumed. Assumed things would get done. Assumed I'd handle it. Assumed my time was more flexible because my work mattered less. But assumptions don't announce themselves. They slip in quietly. Looking back, there were moments I dismissed too quickly. Small things. A sigh if dinner was late. A joke about how nice it must be to work in sweatpants. Comments framed as humor but carrying a little edge. I'd smile. I'd brush them off. I'd tell myself I was being sensitive. Because when you're invested in stability, you protect it. Even from your own doubts. Most evenings followed the same rhythm. We ate together, talked about his day more than mine. He was tired. He deserved rest. I listened. I adjusted. I learned when to speak and when not to. None of this felt like sacrifice at the time. It felt like love with maturity. Inside, though, there was a quiet hope I didn't say out loud, that one day he'd look around and notice. Not praise, not applause, just acknowledgement. That sense of being seen. And sometimes I thought I saw it. A quick thanks. A brief smile. Enough to keep me believing. Until one night, a few weeks before everything changed, something small happened. I asked him if he could help with the dishes. Just that. Not because I was overwhelmed, but because I was tired. He paused. Not long. Just long enough. Then he said, I worked all day. The words themselves weren't shocking. It was the way he said them. Final, unquestioned. As if my day existed in a different category entirely. I remember nodding, rinsing the plates, telling myself it didn't matter. That partnership's ebb and flow. That this was just a moment. But something in me registered it. Quietly, like a file being saved in the back of my mind. Now let me ask you something before I go further. Have you ever had that gut feeling that something was off, but you ignored it because you didn't want to believe it? Tell me in the comments. I want to know I'm not alone in this, because that's where I was. Standing in a clean kitchen, convincing myself everything was fine, while a small, uneasy awareness waited patiently for the moment it would no longer be ignored. That moment came sooner than I expected. The first real crack didn't come during an argument. It came during a completely ordinary afternoon. I was sitting at the kitchen table with my laptop open, half working, half paying bills. The house was quiet. Too quiet, in that midday way where you can hear the hum of the refrigerator and nothing else. My phone buzzed on the table beside me. It was a notification from our bank. That wasn't unusual. I handled most of the finances, another task that had slowly become my thing. I opened the app without thinking, expecting to see a routine transaction. Instead, I saw a charge I didn't recognize. It wasn't huge. That's what made it unsettling. Not dramatic enough to trigger panic. Just unfamiliar. A restaurant name I didn't know. A lunch charge. Middle of a workday. My first instinct wasn't suspicion. It was logic. Maybe a client lunch. Maybe a work meeting. Maybe a name change. I scrolled. Another charge. Same place. Different day. I checked the date. He told me he ate at his desk that day. I felt that small, sharp pause inside my chest, the one you get right before your mind starts offering explanations you didn't ask for. I didn't confront him. Not yet. That evening, I watched more carefully than usual. Listened harder. He talked about work, about being tired, about how busy everything was. I nodded. I responded in the right places. I waited for an opening that never came. Later that night, while he was in the shower, his phone lit up on the nightstand. I wasn't snooping. I didn't pick it up. I didn't touch it. I just saw the name on the screen. A woman's name I didn't recognize. The message preview disappeared before I could read it. But the timing stuck with me. The coincidence stacked itself neatly on top of the bank charges in my mind. I slept that night, but lightly, like part of me was on watch. The next day, I noticed how often he angled his phone away from me, how quickly he silenced notifications, how his explanations were just a little too polished, too ready. Still, I said nothing. Because here's the truth no one likes to admit. Doubt doesn't feel brave. It feels destabilizing. And I didn't want to destabilize my life without certainty. So I waited. A few days later, I brought up the restaurant casually. Not accusatory. Just curious. "Oh," he said, barely looking up. "That work thing?" The answer came too fast. I nodded, smiled, let it go. But something inside me shifted. My instincts, quiet until then, sat up and paid attention. From that point on, I started noticing the pattern. Not just what he did, but what he stopped doing. Less eye contact, less presence, conversations that skimmed the surface and ended quickly. His patience thinner, his appreciation absent. And threaded through all of it was something new. Dismissiveness. If I mentioned being tired, he reminded me I worked from home. If I talked about stress, he compared it to his. If I asked for help, he acted inconvenienced. It was subtle, almost invisible, but it was there. One night, as we were getting ready for bed, he looked around the room, at the folded laundry, the clean floor, the lamp I'd fixed earlier that day, and said, almost absent-mindedly, "Must be nice to have so much free time." That was when I knew. Not that he was cheating, not yet, but that he had already decided my contribution didn't matter. And when someone devalues you quietly, they don't see betrayal as a betrayal. They see it as an upgrade. I didn't cry. I didn't panic. I didn't lash out. I observed. I started paying attention to facts instead of feelings. Dates, times, words, gaps. I became patient in a way that surprised even me, because something in my chest had gone still. Not cold, focused. Pause for a second. What would you have done in my position? Would you have confronted him right then, or waited and watched? Drop your answer below. I really want to know. I chose to wait, and in doing so, I gave him all the space he needed to show me exactly who he thought I was, and how little he thought I was worth. That realization would change everything. The truth didn't arrive all at once. It came in pieces. Sharp, quiet pieces that cut deeper because I had time to feel each one. I started with what I could verify. I went back through our bank statements, not obsessively, not in a frenzy. Methodically, I made notes, dates, patterns, lunch charges that lined up with days he claimed to be slammed at work. Small purchases that didn't fit his routines. Nothing outrageous, just consistent. Consistency is louder than drama. Then I checked our shared calendar. Meetings that ran late. Work dinners added last minute. Gaps that didn't exist before. I noticed how often his explanations had started to sound rehearsed, like he'd practiced them before speaking. Still, I told myself I needed proof. Not for confrontation, for clarity. The moment that tipped everything wasn't explosive. It was almost mundane. I was doing laundry one afternoon, folding clothes on our bed, when I reached into his jacket pocket. I expected receipts. Keys. Nothing interesting. Instead, I pulled out a small card. A loyalty card. From the same restaurant. On the back, a name was written. Her name. I sat down on the edge of the bed and stared at it longer than I cared to admit. I remember how quiet the room felt. How my heartbeat didn't speed up the way movies say it should. It slowed, like my body was bracing. That night, I waited until he fell asleep. I didn't shake him awake. I didn't cry in the bathroom. I didn't spiral. I unlocked his phone. He hadn't changed the password. That detail hurt more than anything else. It told me how little he thought he'd be caught. The messages weren't graphic. They didn't need to be. Familiarity was enough. Jokes, Complaints about work. Complaints about me. Subtle, but unmistakable. Lines about how hard his life felt. How understood he felt with her. There it was. Not a one-time mistake. Not confusion. Not loneliness. A narrative. He had rewritten our marriage in a way that made him the victim and me the background noise. The woman who did nothing all day. The one who wouldn't understand him. The one he had outgrown. I put the phone down and sat there in the dark, processing not just what he'd done, but how long he'd been justifying it to himself. This wasn't just betrayal. This was erasure. I need you to understand. This wasn't just betrayal. This was my whole life collapsing. Have you ever been blindsided like this? If you've been there, share your story below. We healed better together. The lowest point didn't come when I read the messages. It came the next morning. He kissed me goodbye like nothing had changed. Grabbed the lunch I'd packed. Thanked me absent-mindedly. Walked out the door. And I stood there holding the quiet evidence of a double life he didn't think I deserved to be honest about. That was when the grief hit. Not loud. Not dramatic. Heavy. Settling. The kind that presses on your chest and makes every movement deliberate. I didn't confront him that day. Or the next. Instead, I watched myself. I noticed how quickly my tears dried when I stopped trying to make sense of his choices. How anger never quite arrived the way I expected. What came instead was distance. A clean, emotional step back. I saw our marriage clearly for the first time, not as a story I believed in, but as a system I'd been maintaining almost alone. And suddenly, his sentence echoed back to me. You don't do anything all day. I understood then that the affair wasn't the beginning. It was a symptom. The beginning was the moment he stopped seeing my effort as effort and started seeing it as entitlement. I went to bed that night with a decision forming quietly in my mind. Not revenge. Not confrontation. Something simpler. Something true. If I did nothing all day, then nothing would be done. That realization didn't make me feel powerful. It made me feel finished. Finished explaining. Finished proving. Finished carrying a life that someone else had already walked away from. The next step wouldn't be loud, but it would be unmistakable. The morning after that realization, I woke up before my alarm. I lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to his breathing beside me, and I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Control. Not over him, over myself. I didn't rush into action. I didn't pack bags or make threats. I made coffee. I got dressed. I moved through the house the same way I always did, except for one deliberate change. I stopped anticipating his needs. I didn't pack his lunch. I didn't check his schedule. I didn't think ahead. When he noticed, he didn't comment. He just grabbed something on his way out and left. That was the first confirmation that my plan would work. What I decided wasn't dramatic. It didn't require confrontation or secrets. It required discipline, emotional restraint, the kind that's harder than yelling. I decided to live exactly how he described me. If I did nothing all day, then I would do nothing that benefited him. No cooking for two. No cleaning shared spaces beyond what I personally used. No reminders. No smoothing over. No emotional labor. I still worked. I still took care of myself. I wasn't trying to punish him. I was stepping out of a role he had already dismissed. The emotional part was harder than the logistics. I had to sit with the discomfort of leaving things undone, of watching small messes accumulate, of not correcting things automatically, of allowing him to experience consequences without interference. And in those quiet moments, I reflected about how often I'd filled silence to keep peace, about how often I'd softened myself to avoid conflict, about how easily I'd accepted being undervalued as the cost of stability. This wasn't about revenge. It was about alignment, matching my energy to reality instead of hope. As days passed, I noticed something strange. I felt lighter, not happy, not relieved, just unburdened. Without his expectations shaping my day, time felt different. My thoughts were my own again. I realized how much mental space had been consumed by anticipating his comfort. Meanwhile, he started to notice. At first, it was small comments. Did you mean to leave this here? Are we out of clean towels? I responded neutrally, calmly, without explanation, then confusion, then irritation. He didn't ask if I was okay. He asked why things weren't done. And that told me everything. The affair faded into the background of my mind, not forgotten, but no longer the central wound, because the deeper truth was unfolding in real time. He didn't miss me. He missed what I provided. The turning point came one evening when he stood in the kitchen, looking around at the cluttered counters and empty fridge. "What's going on?" he asked. I met his eyes. Steady, unemotional. "I'm doing what you said," I replied. That was it. No accusation. No confession. No tears. Just a mirror. He didn't argue. He laughed it off. Said I was being dramatic. Said I'd prove a point. But I could see it then. The unease. The realization that this wasn't a phase. Here's where I made my choice. Do you believe in revenge or in walking away? When someone destroys your trust, what's the right move? Comment below. I want both sides. I chose to stay present, but detached. I didn't confront the affair. Not yet. I wanted him to sit with the version of life he claimed was effortless. I wanted him to experience what nothing actually felt like when it was real. This wasn't about humiliation. It was about clarity. And clarity has a way of accelerating everything. By the end of the first week, the house felt different. Louder, heavier, disorganized, tense. By the start of the second week, he was unraveling, and I was ready for whatever came next. Because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't reacting. I was choosing. The second week didn't creep in. It hit. The house smelled stale. Dishes stacked in the sink. Laundry overflowed the basket and spread onto the floor like it had given up trying to stay contained. The fridge was empty except for condiments and a carton of milk that had gone sour. I moved through it all quietly, calmly, like a guest. He, on the other hand, was unraveling. Short sentences, sharp movements, doors closing harder than necessary. He complained about work, about being tired, about how nothing ever seemed to be in order anymore. I listened. I didn't fix. One night, he snapped. "What do you even do all day?" he demanded, standing in the middle of the kitchen, gesturing at the mess like it had personally betrayed him. I looked at him, really looked, and for the first time, I didn't feel small. "I do exactly what you said I do," I answered. My voice was steady, almost gentle. "Nothing." That's when it finally broke through. He started listing things. Rapid fire, laundry, meals, cleaning, organization, all the things he hadn't noticed until they were gone. I let him finish. Then I said, yes, those things still exist. They're just not invisible anymore. This is the moment everything changed. Be honest. Are you rooting for me right now, or do you think I went too far? Tell me in the comments. I can take it. He went quiet. Not angry quiet. Disoriented quiet. The kind that comes when your internal story collapses. And that's when I told him. Not about the messages. Not about the loyalty card. About the sentence. "I believed you," I said. "When you told me I did nothing all day. I believed you. So I stopped." His face shifted. Guilt tried to surface, but pride fought it. He muttered something about stress, about misunderstanding, about how he didn't mean it like that. I nodded. "But you said it." The begging didn't happen immediately. First came bargaining. He promised to help more, to be better, to appreciate me. He offered vague apologies without naming what he'd done wrong. I didn't accept any of it, because apologies without awareness are just fear talking. 2 days later, he came home early. The house was worse than before. No dinner, no clean clothes, no order. He sat down heavily at the table and put his head in his hands. "I can't do this," he said quietly. "I need you." There was not love. Need. I felt something then, not satisfaction. Sadness. Because the man begging in front of me wasn't begging for me. He was begging for the system I had built and he had dismissed. "I'm not doing this anymore," I said. "Not like before." He looked up, eyes wide. "Then what do we do?" I took a breath. I stopped pretending I'm invisible, I said. And you stopped pretending you didn't benefit from it. He asked if we could go back. I shook my head. There is no back. That was the climax, not shouting, not exposure, not drama, just truth landing all at once. The house stayed messy that night. So did our marriage. And for the first time, he understood that what he called nothing had been everything holding his life together. But understanding came too late. Because once you see your worth clearly, you can't unsee it. And I was already deciding what came next. The days after that conversation felt strangely quiet. Not peaceful, just stripped down. Like all the noise had finally said what it needed to say and left us alone with the aftermath. We existed in the same space, but not together. We spoke when necessary. Logistics. Neutral tones. The house remained half messy, half functional, because I only handled what belonged to me now. My laundry, my meals, my routines. What was lost became obvious quickly. He lost convenience, comfort, predictability, the ease of a life managed by someone else. I lost something less visible, but heavier. I lost the version of myself who believed effort would eventually be recognized without being demanded. What changed, though, was more important. I slept better. I stopped apologizing for taking up space. I noticed how much energy I had once I wasn't managing someone else's emotions. We talked, carefully, honestly, for the first time in a long while. He admitted feeling entitled, admitted he'd stopped seeing my work as work. He even admitted, eventually, to the emotional affair. He framed it as confusion, as stress, as feeling unseen. I listened. I didn't argue, because by then, I knew the truth. People don't cheat because they are unseen. They cheat because they choose the easiest story. There was counseling. There were long pauses. There were moments where staying felt possible, and moments where it didn't. What remained, through all of it, was my clarity. I no longer negotiated my worth. I no longer filled silence just to ease discomfort. If something felt wrong, I named it. Calmly, directly. Looking back now, I wonder if I'd do it the same way again. What about you? Was the pain necessary to become who you are today? Let me know below. We didn't fix everything. That's the truth. Some things don't break cleanly, and they don't heal neatly either. But I rebuilt myself in the process. Slowly, intentionally, without asking permission. I learned that contribution isn't just what you do. It's what you allow yourself to be reduced to. I learned that silence can be louder than arguments, and boundaries don't need theatrics to be effective. Most of all, I learned that staying calm isn't weakness. It's often the strongest position in the room. By the time we reached a decision about our marriage, it wasn't fueled by anger. It was fueled by honesty. And honesty, once it arrives, doesn't leave much room for illusion. What I carried forward wasn't resentment. It was certainty. Certainty that I would never again confuse being needed with being valued. And that certainty became the foundation for everything that came next. By the time everything settled, I understood something I wish I'd known earlier. You can love someone deeply and still disappear inside their life. That doesn't happen all at once. It happens quietly, through small compromises, through unspoken expectations, through telling yourself that being easy is the same as being loved. I used to think strength looked like endurance, like patience without limits, like holding things together no matter the cost. I was wrong. Strength, I learned, is knowing when to stop performing your worth for someone who's already decided not to see it. I didn't scream. I didn't expose him publicly. I didn't try to win. I simply aligned my actions with the truth. And the truth was this: when I stopped doing everything, I finally saw what everything had been worth. Not to him, but to me. If you're listening to this and you feel unseen, if you feel like your effort has become expected instead of appreciated, I want you to know something. You're not imagining it, and you're not wrong for wanting more. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do isn't to argue your value, but to stop giving it away where it isn't respected. So here's my final question. Is it better to forgive and move on, or to make sure they understand exactly what they lost? There's no wrong answer. Drop it in the comments. So that's my story. folks. If it resonated with you, go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I want to know how far Emily Parker's voice travels. Never shrink yourself to keep a relationship comfortable. Real love makes room for your full presence.